It is 4:30. I feel like a radio DJ. Okay, I'm going to spotlight myself. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to a talk by Peter Koch, a meditation on the humanist side of printing. I am Teresa Whitehill, and along with my co-instigators of BAM, Felicia Rice and Zita Borsich, I'd like to welcome you on behalf of BAM and on behalf of Partners Gallery to this presentation. Book Arts Mendocino, or BAM for short, is a series of exhibitions and displays, talks and readings, workshops and demonstrations devoted to the wide-ranging and varied arts of the book. 24 events are taking place throughout Mendocino County as we speak. They've been running from the beginning of January and they will run through the end of February 2022. So we're right in the middle of it. The idea for BAM came about when Partners Gallery invited the three of us, Felicia, Zita, and I, all letterpress printers, to be guest exhibitors. And you can see the exhibit behind me. While planning the exhibit, we thought, what if we were to invite other venues in the area to host concurrent events? And the response from the community has been amazing. We have 24 different venues who have joined us in celebrating the arts of all things related to the book. You will see in the chat that we have posted links so that you can find out more about Peter Koch, our speaker today, and about the Partners Gallery exhibit, which is called 3 Letterpress Printers Walk into a Shed, as well as about BAM. And so a little housekeeping. We are leaving the audience muted for the duration of the presentation. Due to its brevity, a half hour, there will not be time for live questions. However, you can post questions or comments in the chat, which we will save and forward to Peter. We are recording this talk and we will be providing a video link at some point. If you wish to be on our mailing list for BAM and to receive notification of when the video link is posted, send one of us an email. You'll see emails for us in the chat. For those of you who are physically present in Mendocino this afternoon, we look forward to seeing some of you at the artist reception at Partners Gallery from 5 to 7 this evening. And I'm going to show you the folks sitting at the gallery watching. So in the background, you can see Felicia Rice's work on the table directly behind our 2 front people, and my broadsides on the right, and Zita's work on the back. So I'm now going to turn this over to Felicia Rice, who will introduce Peter.
Welcome to Mendocino, Peter.
Thank you.
We had hoped that you and Susan would be able to celebrate Valentine's Day here on the coast, combining that trip with this short talk and then dinner together at Zita's. We're sorry you can't be here in person, but we are more than happy to have you with us virtually. I must have met Peter in the early 1980s. At the time, we were a small community of letterpress printers sprinkled across the globe, but my immediate cohort, including Teresa and Zita, stretched from Santa Cruz up and down the coast of Northern California. Our generation was laying claim to a dying craft, a form of printing which was barely economically viable. Metal type and working letterpresses were still available new, but abounded on the used equipment market and could be very cheap. We were lucky to learn from old timers, printers who still went to work every day and knew the trade inside out. While at the same time, older fine printers were often generous with their knowledge of the printing and binding of beautiful books. In 1974, after years of study and travel, Peter Rutledge Koch, designer, printer, artist, and author, founded a letterpress printing office in his hometown of Missoula, Montana. In 1978, he moved his press to the San Francisco Bay Area, where he continues to work today. Since 1983, Peter has published under numerous imprints named to suit different aspects of his work: Peter Koch Printers, Hormone de Range Editions, Editions Koch, and the Real Lead Saloon. His books and artworks have been the subject of numerous solo exhibitions at the New York and San Francisco Public Libraries, the Widener Library at Harvard University, and Stanford University Library, the Yellowstone and Missoula Art Museums, and the Grolier Club in New York City, to name a few. In 2005, he and his wife, Susan Filter, founded the CODEX Foundation to preserve and promote the arts of the book. Since 2007, over 200 presses have gathered every year from around the globe to show artist books, book arts, and fine press books, a singular opportunity to learn from one another and to shape the future of the field. In April, we are looking forward to the 8th CODEX International Book Fair and Symposium to be held in Richmond and Berkeley, delayed a year by COVID. For 20 years, from 1991 to 2011, Peter taught the history of the book as a work of art at the University of California, Berkeley. And in 2018, he founded Extraction, Art on the Edge of the Abyss, a movement that continues to sweep the world of artists and activists who are concerned about the destruction of the environment by irresponsible industrial extraction and pollution. Peter, you write, "There are books that radiate light into the world, luminous objects that reflect the hands that made them. Everything depends upon the right relationship between an idea and its maker. Everything depends upon the light." Please share your thoughts on books, light, the artist Durand, and Renaissance humanism. I may interject a few questions as they come up in this short 30-minute fireside chat.
Okay, all right. Thank you so much. Thank you. My great. I have a great deal of admiration for that network that Felicia spoke of, and the three people who are behind BAM. The only way I could escape the fate of feeling trapped like a rat in a labyrinth when I first moved to California was to visit them in Santa Cruz and in Mendocino, and that way I felt Montana sort of creeping back into my life. Otherwise, I really felt trapped in the maze. But and our friendships have lasted a mighty long time, guys. So it's really been it's a pleasure. That quote about the light, you know, the origin of that quote. I mean, I coined it in my own way, but is something called light metaphysics, and it was practiced during the Middle Ages, late Middle Ages, and it flowered really in a lot of ways in something called the Renaissance or the Humanist period. And so I'm speaking to you guys, to you all as an artist, but I'm going to speak through the lens of humanism, and not abstraction and not surrealism, but a theory of art and life and science that originated in 15th century Italy. And that theory has informed my better parts of myself more than anything else on earth that I have experienced, you know, on an intellectual and as a sort of an audience. And it begins really with not just the early printers like Aldus Manutius or Nicholas Jensen or Gerhard Ratdolt and endless Venetian, German, French early printers, but it also begins in the diaspora, or at least the movement of you know, when all the Christians were chased out of Constantinople, and they brought with them the Platonic Academy to Florence. They brought with them their Greek philosophies, and it had been hidden. You know, the word humanism really is a word that is not necessarily thought of in its real, more or less, its original meaning. And a humanist was like not a theologian in our today's sense. In their terms and their time, there was no division between art and God and the religion. It was all just one, and it was unquestioned. You didn't have a choice. You were living in a world that if you said the wrong thing, you might, you know, end up being tossed onto a pyre and burnt in the middle of a square. So you always towed a certain line, but yet there was in that humanist tradition a secret tradition or an occult tradition. And that's out of which I think that we as artists speak, that we as printers have a voice, especially if you're taking it from the point of view of art. And that's how I came to this concept of the light and the light metaphysics, because really we're practicing that is, as artists, I think we're practicing a kind of a form of sympathetic magic, if you will. These humanist period occult philosophers, the ones that didn't get into the main textbooks because they were not quite, shall we say, that the Catholic Church wasn't all that happy with them. So they had to sort of self-mute, and also were muted, like Bruno, who was burnt in Rome. Yet they had access to the kind of things that we rebels in the 1960s and later were seeking with all our heart. They had access to a kind of a knowledge that was only shared in the more or less in the artistic community. And I name as artists, I don't know, people like Anselm Kiefer, I think, has tied to a more or less a Hermetic tradition, and there are many like him. I really shouldn't try to go down that road, not being an art historian, but I have spent 30, 40, 50, 60 now years reading in the history of ideas, and have taken action with it. So if you look at a list of books that I printed, and I always took printing as a means to an end, and the end was publishing. It was publishing, but I wanted to publish and at the same time save my soul. And one of the ways that I understood that I could save my soul was to meditate and try and find my soul, if I had such a thing as a soul. And so I found that my form of meditation, once I had given up skiing and fly fishing as my primary interests in life, it became printing. And, lucky for me, I didn't have to become a professional fisherman or a professional skier, because either one of them wouldn't have satisfied me anywhere near as much as being a professional printer has. So I began printing to publish books, and discovered that, much to my surprise, that my neighbors were trying to get me to print their business cards. They thought of a printer as someone who prints business cards. That's what they knew about printing. That's how much they knew about printing. Now, these people were all college educated. We were in a college town, and I was in a town full of college educated artists. But when they heard the word printing, they thought, I can get my business card done. They didn't think, oh, let's go over to Koch's place and let's make some prints. He's got all that weird stuff, that has been sitting around in drawers for 150 years. Why don't we just take it out and mess with it? They didn't ever occur to them that that's what they should do. So I ended up being a professional business card printer for quite a while, and because my professional business was so lousy, I had a lot of extra time, and I used that time to make books, and that's all I've ever done since. And so I've carved out a life of making books and using the printing press, but from the point of view, I think of a ramble. I'm rambling on here, but the point of view really is from that of a humanist. And my readings in the last few weeks have included some pretty interesting studies on Albrecht Dürer and his master print Melancholy, or the Angel of Melancholy, and then his other master print Jerome in his study. And I think that I could say that quite rightly, that as a human, fully in my full clothes, with no isms or specialties, that those two images of a man in his study, or a scholar, it doesn't have to be a man, in his study with, by the way, a cat and a dog, right? There's a lion and there's a dog, and that dog looks like my dog, and that cat does not look like mine. And then Melancholy, and she's perched on a looks like she's she's sitting in a chair, and she is contemplating, maybe darkly, but she's contemplating number and mathematics. She has you know, the tools. She has the floor is littered with Platonic solids. There's there are measuring calipers like the Masonic symbol. And Durand had discovered, I think, early on in his career, after he traveled to Italy and been in contact with these Renaissance philosophers like Marcello Ficino and Cornelius Agrippa, and I could go through a lot of names. You may not know them if you hadn't read in these more or less obscure histories of Renaissance thought, but he had learned from them that number is the secret of the universe. Okay, through the Hermetic studies, you know, Hermes was thought to have been an Egyptian god, right? Thoth. And what was more magnificent to the Romans, for instance, of that period, than the Egyptian ruins? They were importing them as fast as they could. They were knocking down what they could drag into Rome. Well, they were thinking that these geometers, these master geometers in Egypt, you know, were onto something, and that maybe they had more power and more knowledge than they did, which they did. Because certainly in the Renaissance, nobody could have built a pyramid. They had no clue. And we still don't really know how they did it. But they found these philosophers who were studying Hermetic philosophy that came in through the Neoplatonists and the Platonic tradition from Byzantium, you know, that when we, although I'm not a Christian, although I'm born into a very Christian family, when we were thrown out of when we were thrown off the peninsula there in Istanbul. Well, all of these thoughts were transmitted to Durand, and if you stop to think for a second about what it is about Durand's images that are so gobsmackingly original and knocking you over when you look at them, remember that he basically, you know, as a student of Riedman de Vries, discovered perspective in printmaking. I mean, what you do as a printer in the workshop of Albrecht Dürer and his teacher Volgemuth was that you entered into a theater, a three-dimensional theater with perspective, and that was granted through geometry, and that geometry was transmitted through the Hermetic tradition, and that tradition is in fact occult. It's been occulted. The geometry is not gone, but the tradition from which it came has been occulted because it was deemed not only heretical, but eventually the scientists were able to, during the Enlightenment, were able to put it down so successfully because they chose, of course, the most obvious things to hit it with. You know, the fact that you know that your astrology, you know, is going to guide your life, but once you go deeper into the structures of magic and sympathetic magic, you come to discover that there's a lot more to it than erroneous physics and erroneous chemistry. That there's spiritual meaning and also a deep lesson for those of us, you know, who are forced into our imaginations in order to survive. And
how does that lead us to books?
Sorry, I never get anywhere unless I meander. Well, so. Instead of how does it get us to books, let's talk about the books that it gets us into.
Yes.
I believe that some of the work that I have done is almost sympathetic magic. So that is a situation where in sympathetic magic, it means, you know, that the thing that you are trying to influence, or the person that you're trying to influence, is more influence if what you're using as a tool to influence them is of the thing that you're trying to gain power over. So for instance, I was interested, I don't know, that's kind of a complex way to look at it, but it's using action. Sympathetic magic is using actions and symbols that resemble what it is that you're trying to accomplish already as your tools. So, you might think that you would eat a walnut if you're trying to make your brain better because it looks like your brain. Well, that's a really crazy stretch, but Now let's move to one of my books. I think that the world that I live in is terrifically being toxified and destroyed by man's idiotic practices, and so it's destroyed by toxic substances like lead and lead mining. And so I thought I would make myself a book of the sayings of Diogenes, his Diogenes talk and his philosophical principles are really toxic to prejudice and elitism and arrogance. I mean, he was a he was a fly in everybody's ointment, and so I thought, well, if he's if his thinking is sort of toxic to the kind of things I'd like to get rid of, maybe I'll make it of a toxic substance. Well, I'll just print it on lead sheets, which, by the way, were curse sheets in the at the time that Diogenes was alive. If you wanted to curse somebody, you wrote on a sheet of lead. Wow. And you scratched a terrible curse in it, and then you tossed it in their drinking water. Clever. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, another book that I made called Liber Ignis is about mining, and it's about really the true horror of extractive mining on both the environment and the people that are doing the mining. And I had made the book out of lead. And I also made the book out of copper, because it was a copper mine. And before it was a copper mine, it was a lead mine. After it was a lead mine, it was a silver mine. And after it was a silver mine, it was a gold mine. And then it became a copper mine. And so all of those substances are in my book. And the only thing missing in that mine is the oil. Well, but I did it anyway. I just stuck oil in the book, and I made the interleaving material of synthetic fibers. So instead of printing on actual paper made from actual living plants, I used petroleum paper, petroleum-made based paper as printmaking, and also industrial felt. So in a way, these things creep into my books, and it got there through, shall we say, sympathetic magic. I don't know.
And this whole process is a ritual, the making, the resolution in book form. I mean, the entire process.
Yeah. Yeah, no, of course, you would know. But,
very long ritual.
We all know. I mean, yeah. So that's an example. But and how it also leads to books is that, books are for me instruments of some form of enlightenment, I guess I would call it, and that's because I keep using the word light. And also, books are like symphonies. They're like, well, or if not symphonies, maybe more like concerti, smaller groups and more intimate than a symphony. Books are, maybe the chamber music of the mind. And so thinking these thoughts and having studied, professionally as a undergraduate and graduate student in the history of ideas and thinking and thought, has led me to making books like the Renaissance philosophers made, then Renaissance printers made. When they printed the first Greeks, well, I printed a new Greek translation, or a new American translation of an old Greek, Parmenides, and I did the same with Heraclitus. And the Parmenides translation that I did was by a great Canadian poet and philosopher and essayist, Robert Bringhurst. The Heraclitus translation I did was from a man who I would give exactly the same description, and maybe not so much the poet, but Guy Davenport, who was a great thinker and a essayist and teacher. I wanted to work with the instruments of printing, and I wanted to reach the mind of my fellows, and I also wanted to influence them. So although I don't expect my influence to influence many, maybe only really a few, one or two people. I've had a couple of great students, and I've had some really good students, and then I've had some indifferent and who cares, kind of students. But the really great ones are the ones that I guess I was speaking to, and that's why we publish. That's why we make things that have content that express our finer, less base qualities, I guess. I mean, the opposite. I mean, imagine in my booth at the Frankfurt Book Fair next to a pornographer's booth. Okay, you know, there'd be a difference, right? I mean, I know because I saw that pornographer's booth, you know, at the Frankfurt Book Fair. And, you know, there were the naked girl, almost naked girls parading around. And here was this animalistic beast of a man behind the camera, tracking them with his camera, you know, looking like he was raping them right there on the floor, you know, right next to the hot dog stand, you know, on the fourth floor of the Frankfurt Book Fair. But you just had to go, you know, 30 steps away, and you could see, you know, the absolutely exquisite work of our German friends, you know, Tobias Lange or Veronica Schapers. It just was insane, you know, the conjuncture that, you know. So I knew that I wanted to lean on the side that, you know, as far away from porno as I could get.
And you have a new project. I mean, it's a very old project. We have to wrap up here. And I was thinking of the book
my
I
goodness.
know,
It goes
the
so
40-year project that's
oh
coming.
yes, Jesus, oh my God, yeah. I mean, I didn't even mention, you know, extraction. I didn't mention, but here.
Well, we mentioned extraction. We got
You
there.
did, okay. All right, so for 40,
Grab a book.
for almost 40 years, I've been working on this book. And if you can see the cover at all, it looks like a waste sheet from Ovid's Metamorphoses, which is, this is a facsimile of it. But the book is really about different subjects matters. For instance, as different as this.
Mushroom
Okay.
Cloud.
Okay, we've got it, you know, you can see that this is the Inuit talk, but also a map of hell. So what I created with this book, and there are like 1, 2, 3, there's a fourth out here that you can't see, marginal, more margin, levels of text on each page. And it's the history of the world, and it starts with the creation of the world. And, you know, and well, never mind. It's just too complex to get on this little screen in a minute. But yes, I'm working on the Speculum Mundi, which is one final last step in this
Journey.
you know, this bookmaking thing. I mean, I've got a, well, maybe second to last. I've got another one coming up.
So those of us out here have an opportunity to really dive into your thinking of the last 40 years in this new book. I mean, this one seems to reveal even more than the earlier work.
Yeah, very
Yeah.
complex. It's an encyclopedia of my mind.
When will it be available?
Codex.
Codex. Go
It'll
to
be-
the Codex
yeah,
Book Fair.
It'll be at the Codex Book Fair, or, you know, probably in about 30 days, it'll be listed on my website for sale.
So the Codex Book Fair is April 10th through 13th.
Yeah,
And the fair itself, open to the public, is at the Craneway Pavilion in Richmond. And the symposium is at the Berkeley Art Museum.
well, it won't be at the Art Museum, but it'll be at the a block from the Art Museum. It'll be on campus.
On campus, as it has been in the past, I believe.
Yeah, at the Anna Head Hall.
Great, great. So this is the 8th Codex, and I can't tell you how much I'm looking forward to it and seeing you and our friends and this coming together from across the globe. And you have spearheaded this over, and Susan, beginning in 2007, and it truly is a wonderful opportunity to take the pulse of what's going on in the world of artists' books and find press beautiful books. We influence one another, the conversations and what's generated out of that confluence of 200 plus is truly amazing. And we thank you for creating this opportunity.
Well, thank you for coming, if you're coming, and thanks for hosting me to let me ramble on this kind of meander that I've taken you on.
No, this is fascinating. So we're going to wrap up, and it's time for us to move on. And I just wanted to thank those who were able to make it today for joining us. And we're definitely going to have this recorded and available online. And hopefully others will be able to check in. I myself, I mean, I know Peter speaks and has spoken quite a lot, but I have never heard him speak this way about these thoughts. And so I think this has been a really unique opportunity for me, and I hope for others. And thank you so much for joining us. And we wish we could have dinner this evening together, but we will in the future.
Soon.
Thank
Thank
you
you.
so much, Peter.
You're welcome. Thank you. Thank you, guys. Appreciate it. Bye.
Have a wonderful evening.
Thanks for coming, everybody. Bye-bye.